Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 105. Things That Can't Be Changed. Part 4. I'm sorry, but that's a bit difficult. I thought it was time for this guy to come out. It was the fucking intermediate Dakibi. This guy managed the entire soul scenario and couldn't help moving it this time. However, I was a bit confident. Why is it difficult? We aren't breaking the scenario's rules. Spare the disaster? Are you insane? You must want to die. No, it is the opposite. I am doing this to live. The voice of the intermediate Dakibi became harder. Don't you know that this is a violation of the rules? The content of the scenario is to kill the disaster. If you don't stick to the scenario, don't worry. I will kill the disaster. Everyone looked at me the moment I said these words. Juicy, what are you? In particular, Li Jihai looked at me like I was a psychopath. It wasn't strange. I previously said I wouldn't kill the disaster, and now I said I would. Most of the party members were waiting for my next words. I felt a bit flattered by the trusting silence. Just not right now. What? The scenario doesn't indicate a time limit. Then it is up to us when we want to kill the disaster. The intermediate Dakibi looked like he had eaten Chinese medicine. Thus, there is no need to rush. The disaster, Shin Yusung, looked up at me with a bemused expression. She hadn't known that such a thing was possible. The constellation, Scribe of Heaven, is looking at you with strange eyes. The agitation of the constellations couldn't be felt. There weren't many episodes that rebelled against the scenario, even when I searched all of ways of survival. That's why it was of great interest to the constellations. This was particularly true in situations where the distinction between good and evil was ambiguous. The number of subscribers from the absolute good or absolute evil constellations would rise in an overwhelming manner. It was their daily routine to discern the good and evil of the characters. I can't allow it. Are you going to interfere in another scenario? Have you forgotten what happened last time? My confidence came from the fact that this was a main scenario, not a sub-scenario. It was also the fifth scenario that was scaled to engulf all of the dome, making it difficult for the intermediate Dakibi to change the criteria of the scenario. In addition, the intermediate Dakibi had already received disciplinary action from the Bureau. He must be afraid of being punished again and didn't have much chance of winning this fight against me. I saw Baihyun biting his nails nearby and told him, be prepared. If something happens, you are the only one I can believe in. Damn it, why should I? Don't forget that we will die together. Baihyun settled down and the intermediate Dakibi opened his mouth. Very interesting. But it won't turn out as you think. Yes, I knew he wouldn't give up easily. Not all incarnation in Soul Dome are the same as you. The intermediate Dakibi flicked his finger. Then system messages popped up. A new sub-scenario has arrived. I knew what he was thinking. If he couldn't touch the main scenario, then he would set up the sub-scenario. From now on, I will double the bounty on the disaster. The original compensation was 100,000 coins and it was doubled, which meant 200,000 coins. It was an amount that could make someone rise to the top of Soul Dome in an instant. It was enough to risk their lives. For some reason, no incarnations came running. Don't move. Cherish your lives. If you don't want to die like moths. The powerful kings were controlling the incarnations. They were King of Beauty, Min Jaiwan, and Mithriya King Cha Sangkyung. There was also the neutral king, John Ildo. The constellation Maritime War God is proud of the incarnations on the Korean peninsula. Of course, there were forces that the kings couldn't control, but they also didn't act. They had already seen the power of the disaster. It was natural that a small number of people wouldn't act, regardless of whether the reward was 100,000 or 200,000 coins. There was also our party covering the disaster, Shin Yusung. How disappointing. The incarnations of Soul Dome are cowards. There was an ominous feeling in the air. The intermediate Dakibi was thinking about how to make this situation worse. I had to act quickly. At this point, I had to go for victory. Do you yield? Honestly, won't everyone be satisfied? Everyone will be satisfied? I didn't say anything else. I'm sure the intermediate Dakibi understood without me saying anything. Haha, I see. Is that what you were thinking? I heard from Gak, but you truly put on a great show. The reason for the existence of the Dakibis was the scenarios. They were the scenarios that many constellations responded to and many constellations liked. In the world of the star stream, there was only one case where there was a miracle that reversed the scenario. It was if the majority of constellations saw the scenario and wanted to change the direction of the scenario. Certainly, violence isn't the only stimulus. I tried to appeal to the constellations with disaster Shin Yusung's situation. I chose words to avoid the filtering and continued to ignite the constellations by exposing information. I made them sympathize with the disaster Shin Yusung. It was all to support my rebellion. As a result, this whole situation was created. Indeed, I could hear the messages of the constellations in my ears. The constellation Bald General of Justice respects your will. The constellation Last Hero of Wangsanbeil admires your will. Everything was going as planned. If you understand, then can you decide now? Give me the reward or continue with the fifth scenario. There was no problem with continuing the sixth scenario even if the fifth scenario hadn't ended. It was possible to run multiple main scenarios. If the Dakibi was smart, then he should stop while the constellations were satisfied. Incarnation, Kim Dokja. You are the smartest and scariest out of all the incarnations I know. I felt a strange sense of incongruity from the Dakibi's expression. However, it is this cleverness that is grabbing at your ankles. What does that mean? The Dakibi's following words weren't for me. Okay, constellations. Now I will show you the story you have been waiting for. Sparks filled the air. The intermediate Dakibi was moving the scenario. The intermediate Dakibi has intervened in the scenario. According to the scenario contract, control of the disaster of flood Shin Yusung has been transferred to the intermediate Dakibi. Shin Yusung's expression started to change at the system messages. And no. Wait. Aok. A black aura rose from disaster Shin Yusung's body. I hurriedly shouted, wait. What are you doing? I am fulfilling the contract. This is a cog in the scenario. I only realized now what he was trying to do. It was the scenario enforcement right. It was the power to control the fate of all parts involved in the scenario. I knew it existed in ways of survival, but I didn't think it would be used immediately. The personality of the character is forcibly changed. The personality of the character, Shin Yusung, will be fixed to evil. The disaster Shin Yusung was becoming a monster. I bit my lip. The scenario enforcement generally wasn't used because the Dakibi consumed a lot of probability. But to use it now, many constellations are cheering the development of the scenario. Many constellations hate your new drama. It could only be used if many constellations agreed to this development. Damn it, why? Dr. SSI? Hyung. The party members nervously approached my side. They realized that something was wrong. However, I couldn't understand. Why had the constellations suddenly turned their backs on me? Bai Hyung's expression was dark as he looked at the sky. Sorry, I tried to persuade them but it didn't work. Why? Your reputation is worse than you expected. The intermediate Dakibi said, arrogant incarnation. Do you think the constellation would be that easy? Then what about all the favorable indirect messages? Well, humans originally have the habit of believing what they want to believe. I had misjudged due to the indirect messages that popped up one after another. Many constellations are laughing at your decision. Some constellations have withdrawn their support for you. That's right. Not all constellations sent indirect messages. Only a small number of constellations sent messages. Many constellations are wary of your intentions. It might be natural that public opinion was bad towards me. I cheated them through a trick and cancelled the event. The constellations probably already knew that Baihyung's channel had a capacity of 9,999. They knew, but had been deceived by my scenario. Now they were no longer fooled. The constellations of the Korean peninsula are looking at you sadly. The constellation Prisoner of the Golden Headband is looking at you with compassion. Maybe I was too shallow when I thought about the constellations. It seems like your luck ends here, Incarnation Kim Dokja. Aha! A disturbing aura flowed from the body of Shin Yu-sung, who had been forced to become evil. It was a killing intent that felt like it could melt flesh. The incarnation screamed and fled. I could see Yu Jong-hyuk pulling out Heaven's shaking sword in the distance. I hope you show a good scenario to the end. I slowly withdrew from the disaster. Shin Yu-sung's face distorted, sadly. It ended up like this. I quickly glanced at Yu Jong-hyuk. Things had turned out this way, and it was obvious what choice he would make. Wait a minute, Yu Jong-hyuk. You have failed. Don't touch the child. I hid the young Shin Yu-sung behind my back. I won't forgive you if you touch this child. Yu Jong-hyuk glared at me. There is no other way. A way. I bit my lips until they bled. There is a way. We need to show the constellations their favorite scenario. What do you mean? Defeat the disaster. Yu Jong-hyuk's expression hardened. It is suicide, Kim Dokja. Are you going to be a pushover? I saw Shin Yu-sung turning into a demon and destroying everything around her. I didn't want it to be like this. This wasn't the ending I wanted. This damn world, even resisting a scenario, became another scenario. Many constellations are excited by your words. Many of the constellations want an exhilarating melee. Yes, they wanted to see this. Support me, Yu Jong-hyuk. I will stop the disaster. I had to give it a try. Kim Dokja, I can do it. I blinked slowly, and the option I had postponed emerged in front of me. You have experienced the first-person supporting role Viewpoint. You can take one of the supporting role skills. Presenting the list of available skills. Please select a skill to acquire. I opened the list and picked an option without hesitation. Number 3, Beast King Sensitivity. The exclusive skill Beast King Sensitivity has been acquired. As if waiting, an ether storm emerged from disaster Shin Yu-sung's hands. It was the ether storm that made a hole in my belly and made Yu Jong-hyuk incapable of fighting. I protected my party members and received the storm head-on. The exclusive skill Beast King Sensitivity LV3 has been activated. A pure white fur cloak. It was a unique skill of Beast Lord Shin Yu-sung. More than half of my magic power was consumed activating it, and I became dizzy, but I succeeded in receiving the attack of Shin Yu-sung. The dignity of Beast King's sensitivity didn't lose to the mighty storm. Yu Jong-hyuk frowned. You stole her skill, but it is still impossible. I know. I looked at disaster Shin Yu-sung. Despite her nature being set to evil and losing control of her body, her eyes were filled with emotions. She told him. It's okay. Kill me. Who could swing a sword after seeing those eyes? The woman who wandered for over 1,000 years and suffered. I had to kill her now. This was the price I paid for failing to change the story. For the first time, I felt resentful that ways of survival had become reality. Open your eyes and watch carefully. I looked up at the sky and declared. This is the scenario you wanted. The exclusive skill bookmark can now be activated. Now that Shin Yu-sung was in her final phase, it was an unwinnable fight. In the end, it was a fight that no one could win. Character bookmarks is activated. Available bookmark slots, 4. Bringing up the list of available bookmarks. I will release Delusion Demon Kim Namwon from the first slot and add Judge of Destruction Young Hee-won. Chapter 106. Things that can't be changed. Part 5. The level of the bookmark skill is low, shortening the activation time. Activation time, 30 minutes. Your understanding of the character is significant. You can select some of her skills to import. Shin Yu-sung ran towards me, and I ran towards her. No one wanted to kill each other, and there was no sincerity. This was only a fight for the constellation's amusement. Everything was a scenario, and therefore everything was fake. However, the result of this battle was that someone was going to die. Judgment Time LV5 has been activated. The activation skill was level 5. It seemed that Young Hee-won had been training hard. Young Hee-won wasn't here, but it wasn't bad. The constellation, Scribe of Heaven, is embarrassed. The constellations of the Absolute Good system are deep in thought. It was natural to be confused since someone who wasn't a judge had used an unauthorized skill. Yet they were bound to give me permission. It was because the presence in front of me was obviously evil. The Absolute Good constellations have agreed to the use of this skill. A hot aura sprang up from deep inside my body. It was a blind sense of righteousness that would punish all evils in the world. The history of the archangels who fought a holy war with the great demons passed through my head in pieces. Punish evil. Judgment Time was originally a skill used by the great Valkyries. Thus, the user of this skill received the archangel's favor. The madness that excluded everything other than the narrow definition of justice wriggled in my brain. Young Hee-won felt like this every time she killed other people for me. It was terrible. A wave of unrivaled magic power burst out from the blade of faith. The ether blade resonated and moved in a straight line towards Shin Yu-sung. Blood splashed from the shoulder of the surprised Shin Yu-sung. The Beast King's sensitivity that wasn't damaged by the shells of the Ghost Fleet was finally torn. Drops of blood fell onto the white fur. Judgment Time. The user of this skill couldn't be defeated as long as the enemy was evil. Now all my stats rose to the point where I could resist the disaster Shin Yu-sung. Judgment Time was a fraudulent skill. There were only a few skills in all of Ways of Survival that could give such crazy buffs. Everyone attack. I might have become stronger, but Shin Yu-sung's skill masteries were still ahead of me. Thus, I needed help. When she is attacking normally, support using ranged attacks. When trying a wide-range attack, be sure to get behind me. The party members nodded at my words. If you don't have ranged support, then kill the monsters emerging from the monster gate. It is urgent as well. In fact, it was because monsters were still emerging from Shin Yu-sung's monster gate that Yongsan-gu was almost on the verge of collapse. Everyone fight. The kings ordered and the full-fledged battle began. The forces of the kings blocked the monsters coming from the monster gate. Most of them were 7th grade species and were quite daunting. Fortunately, the incarnations didn't seem to be greatly pushed back. I'll take care of that monkey. Lee Hyun-sung ran towards the 5th grade heavy metal being. I will take Yu-sung's king. Lee Gil-young moved with the young Shin Yu-sung. Queen Mirabad, controlled by Shin Yu-sung, roared, and some of the Insect King's subordinates that Lee Gil-young summoned rushed towards the King Masswood. The cold breaths of the ichthyosaurs poured towards each other, and Lee Jai-hai stepped forward. Ajusi, let the support firing to me. I'll block her movements. Lee Jai-hai fired the cannons and Yusenga made a trap with Arachne's spiderweb, keeping the movements of the disaster Shin Yu-sung in check. Of course, it was only a small help. The shell bombardment barely damaged her, and Shin Yu-sung just tore apart the web. It was better than nothing. Yu Jong-hyuk. Can you fight? Apart from me, only Yu Jong-hyuk could follow the movements of Shin Yu-sung and endure her attacks to some extent. Don't worry about me. Yu Jong-hyuk spilled blood on the floor as he stood beside me with the heaven-shaking sword. He might have already used recovery because his condition seemed better than before. There wouldn't be long until he received the backlash of using recovery. I asked, how many minutes do you have left? 30 minutes. You? I am the same. It was only possible to use bookmark for 30 minutes. Thus, I had to end it in only 30 minutes. The black aura flowing from Shin Yusung's body thickened. It meant that her physical stats were increasing due to the evil energy. Yu Jonghyuk's expression hardened. It seems that she joined hands with a great demon to cross worlds. Yu Jonghyuk's guess was right. In fact, now her soul was mortgaged to a great demon. Then that great demon turned her over to the damned Akibis. Ha ha ha, interesting. Very interesting. The intermediate Dakibi sounded pleasantly surprised. The scenario is now like this. It was a battlefield where blood splattered and flesh was damaged. The destruction of Seoul Dome, which I wanted to prevent, was approaching with every second. Many constellations are excited by the battle. Let's go. Yu Jonghyuk launched himself quickly along with his words. Shin Yusung puffed up and blew a breath towards us. Beast King's breath. It was an ether storm of destructive that was comparable to the 5th grade sea species ice breath. Avoid it. Yu Jonghyuk invoked Red Phoenix Shuimpa to the extreme and escaped from the attacks of the disaster Shin Yusung. I didn't avoid the attacks like Yu Jonghyuk and used Beast King's sensitivity instead. I felt genuinely impressed with Yu Jonghyuk's combat senses. The disaster was a disaster, but Yu Jonghyuk was a monster. It was only Yu Jonghyuk who could resist the disaster without the judgment time buff. He was a strong, cool, ruthless regressor. I was relieved that he was currently on my side. Do it properly, Kim Dokja. I'm doing it. Damn it. I just needed to approach and deal a blow, but it wasn't that easy. After several successful attacks, Shin Yusung became more violent. She was in a berserk state and kept firing the ether storm. Her magic power might be depleted, but I was barely able to withstand it with Beast King's sensitivity. Yu Jonghyuk had dealt some blows, but the damage hardly accumulated. How long did we exchange blows? It had been already 20 minutes when I came to my senses. Yu Jonghyuk's physical strength dropped sharply, and the magic power potions I drank like juice were running out. Strong. I never thought I would struggle so much, despite using judgment time. My stiff body creaked violently. The side effects of judgment time were gradually being felt. Ha ha ha. This is a really nice scenario. Constellations, don't you agree? I listened to the voice of the intermediate Dakibi and moved forward with all my strength. The fur of the Beast King's sensitivity flapped like crazy. My skin became black from the ether storm. 1 step, 2 steps. I got near, but time wasn't on our side. I wouldn't be able to do enough damage before the 30 minutes was up. Then something happened inside Shin Yusung's body. Her body shook like she was struck by lightning, and her dark eyes temporarily recovered its senses. Attack me. The disaster Shin Yusung was controlling her body with her will. Stop me. I didn't say it, but I heard it. Protect this round. I broke through the temporarily weakened ether storm and ran forward with Yu Jonghyuk. I swung my sword and blood splattered from Shin Yusung's body. The constellation, Scribe of Heaven, is looking at you. I did my best not to show the worst performance. The constellation, Prisoner of the Golden Headband, is looking at you. Shin Yusung screamed as she was cut by the blade, and the storm blew Yu Jonghyuk back. Go, Kim Dokja. I pierced through the gap that Yu Jonghyuk made. The blade of faith dug exactly into Shin Yusung's shoulder without hesitation. Magic power ran through the blade and ripped through the Beast King's sensitivity. Then Shin Yusung's left arm was cut off. Blood fell. I stared into Shin Yusung's face. Just like in Ways of Survival, Shin Yusung was smiling. I realized that she deliberately allowed herself to be hit by my sword. A number of constellations can't take their eyes off your battle. Damn it, I smiled weakly, and the sword fell from my hands. Shin Yusung laughed. Don't you look stupid? She grabbed me and threw me to the ground without any screams of anger. However, it didn't hurt. It wasn't an attack. Do you want to continue? Yes. I swung my sword towards her, and Shin Yusung fired a breath at me again. It was like an answer to a question. We frantically damaged each other. It can't continue like this. My Beast King's sensitivity was losing its effect because I was lacking magic power. Judgment time strengthened my body to the limits, but it was just a temporary crutch. Blood flowed and the world spun because of dizziness. However, I didn't stop. The damage was definitely accumulating. Some constellations reluctant towards you have become curious. Go crazy. The constellations roaming the battlefields are paying attention to your battle. Make a lot of fuss. The constellations of the great battlefields praise your will. Just wait until the day I go and pull out your tongues. How many more blows did we exchange? My weakened body staggered back. There are 30 seconds left for bookmark. Some internal organs were damaged and a broken rib kept irritating my lungs. I did the best I could, yet the disaster was still strong. The recovered eyes of Shin Yusung were once again turning black. In any case, this disaster of floods seemed stronger than the original novel. The disaster, Shin Yusung looked at me with anxious eyes. It isn't enough. She couldn't commit suicide. The intermediate Dakibi wouldn't allow her to die that way. This was the limit that she could penalize herself. I was also at my limit in a different way. How are you going to stop me? Don't worry. They'll come soon. The person who will stop you. From the beginning, I had no intention of killing Shin Yusung with my own hands. It was impossible for Yu Jonghyuk in his current state. There was still one person remaining who could kill her. The moment Shin Yusung's mouth was about to open, the ground around her exploded. There was the distant roar of artillery. A woman dressed in a blue prison uniform appeared from the north. The monster split apart and troops advanced to this side. A woman in a mask stood in the middle and commanded the army. The King of Wanderers. I thought she had gone somewhere, but she had been taking care of the monsters as she advanced from the north. However, they weren't the one I was waiting for. I looked at a person who was running this way. The woman turned this way and asked, "Sorry, am I late?" "Just a bit late." "Stop pretending. Aren't you still alive?" The judge of destruction. 10 days later, Young Hee-won was much more restrained than I knew. She lightly patted my shoulders and moved. "Leave it to me and take a break." A red aura rose as she activated Judgment Time. It was much more powerful than the skill I stole. Young Hee-won was the last card I had left. If this failed, had I done enough damage to Shin Yusung? Would Young Hee-won finish the job well? "What are you so worried about?" Young Hee-won asked with a smile. Confidence that was different than usual filled her voice. It wasn't just Judgment Time that she believed in. The constellation, Scribe of Heaven, is talking to himself. The constellation Abyssal Black Flame Dragon shows hostility towards Young Hee-won's sponsor. That reminded me, Young Hee-won had a sponsor. Who had she chosen? Shin Yusung watched Young Hee-won with shaky eyes. "You. I roughly know the situation. My sponsor was making a lot of noise along the way." Young Hee-won faced Shin Yusung with sad eyes. "Thus, there is no need to worry." Young Hee-won lightly swept her sword in front of her. Flames started to rise from the places her hands touched. It was early in the morning. On a night where the darkness of soul was the darkest, Young Hee-won's blade burned. The flames on the blade were brighter than any flames I had seen. It was the holy white flames of a stigma that would punish all evil. Hell Flames Ignition. I naturally knew this stigma very well. I remembered the description of the stigma from Ways of Survival. In some cases, it was one of the greatest stigmas of Ways of Survival and boasted powerful destructive power comparable to the stigma of the great sage, the equal of heaven. Hell Flames Ignition was the stigma of demon-like Judge of Fire. Young Hee-won laughed coldly. "I will finish this damn scenario." The Archangel Oriel chose Young Hee-won as an incarnation. Chapter 107. Things That Can't Be Changed. Part 6. Young Hee-won ran forward. Her muscles were strengthened by judgment time to the limit, and the demon-slaying buff gave her a sharp edge. Along with Uriel's Hell Flame's ignition, her combat power was enhanced to the most ideal form. The blazing flames of judgment. They weren't judging Shin Yu-sung. Even so, it was Shin Yu-sung who would receive the flames. The constellation demon-like judge of fire is watching the battlefield with sad eyes. Yong Hee-won's blade declared the opening. The character Chu Wan-jin has used Hell Flame's ignition LV1. The stigma was only level 1, but the hell flames burned through Shin Yu-sung's ether storm. The power of a great demon, the Beast King's breath poured out, but Yong Hee-won didn't care. She just grasped her sword as firmly as possible and drew a line connecting the sky and earth. The Beast King's breath turned to smoke as soon as it met Hell Flame's ignition. Someone muttered, "Oh my god, what is that?" Hell Flame's ignition was a stigma that could evaporate the sea of a planet when it reached the final level. When the Messiah appeared in the original novel, it was Uriel who opened the way in preparation for him. The archangel feared by all demons, the great demon's enemy that was closest to a great demon. Shin Yu-sung nodded as she saw Yong Hee-won rushing through the flames. "I see. Uriel. You were waiting for this." The disaster didn't back down in the presence of the terrible archangel. "It is enough to make an ending." No, she looked rather relaxed. It was as if she had finally fulfilled her duty. The ether wrapped around Shin Yu-sung's fist and the flames that clung to Yong Hee-won's blade collided. Shin Yu-sung stumbled and Yong Hee-won pushed forward without missing this gap. No matter how good the overlapped skills, the powerful buffs would have a short duration. Yong Hee-won was well aware of this and accelerated her attacks. The surrounding land was affected by the holy flames. Shin Yu-sung persisted despite being long exhausted. She was like a seasoned actor playing the last performance of her life as she tried her best to live. Many constellations are excited about your design. The constellations that came over from Dokgak's channel were excited. 15,000 coins have been sponsored. The hateful donations of the constellations rose sharply. Affection and hatred were just a moment of entertainment for the constellations. Unfortunately, the story that lasted a moment for them was a life for humans. The constellations of the Korean peninsula are looking at you sadly. In front of the many watchers, I drew the ending of this scenario by myself. The constellation's secretive plotter is focused on your choice. In the meantime, Yong Hee-won had turned the Beast King's sensitivity into rags, and the flames of Hell Flame's ignition were gradually burning Shin Yu-sung. Injuries were also piling up on Yong Hee-won's body. It was a close match, but victory wasn't on the side of the exhausted Shin Yu-sung. Yong Hee-won ignored all defenses and plunged through the ether storm, stabbing her sword into Shin Yu-sung's belly. A bright blaze of flame surrounded Shin Yu-sung's body. The holy flames burned at the energy of the great demon in her body. The black aura coming from her turned to smoke. Blood splattered from the place where the sword was pulled out. Shin Yu-sung looked down at her blood like it was a prop on a stage. It was finally settled. I suddenly saw the collapsed King Masswood and heavy metal beam. The monster gate had closed and the fight against the monsters was ending. I approached Shin Yu-sung. Control of her flesh had come back, but her body wasn't normal. Shin Yu-sung looked down at her body and stated, "I am dying now." In normal cases, the Beast Lord wouldn't die from these wounds. The Beast King's vitality was as good as Yu Jonghyuk's recovery. Unfortunately, she was hit by Hell Flame's ignition. The flames of hell were deeply embedded in her body, burning her vitality to extinguish all evil. Uriel's stigma was a fire that never burned out until all the evil was gone. The exclusive skill, Fourth Wall, is shaking. Due to excessive immersion, Stage 2 of Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint will always be activated. The fire was inside her body, and Shin Yu-sung would never survive. Shin Yu-sung watched me and smiled weakly. "I'm glad to be here during this round of regression." It was good to hear Captain say those words. "It hurts. I'm going to disappear like this. Now I can die in peace. Something really might change." I don't want to die. The omniscience was a curse. Knowing someone's heart meant always deceiving someone. She smiled and stared up at the air. There was an intermediate Dakibi with a stiff expression. I'm going to die now. Isn't it okay as a drama? This was a great scenario. Some constellations are nodding. Some constellations are complaining. The intermediate Dakibi was silent. Well, he hadn't expected this. The scenario was completed, but it wasn't as he intended. Now he would pay for what he intended. I looked back and saw Yu Jong-hyuk approaching. He asked, "Is she going to die?" "Perhaps." "You must be lacking hatred. This bastard was really..." Yu Jong-hyuk pulled out his sword. I was about to stop him from trying to kill Shin Yu-sung when his heaven-shaking sword stopped. The cold blade was supporting Shin Yu-sung's head. Shin Yu-sung said, "Hold on until the end." "I will die soon, Captain." Shin Yu-sung's thoughts flowed into my ears. "There is something I want to hear from you. Just once. I wish to hear it just once." They were words that could never be said. Yu Jong-hyuk couldn't hear these words and spoke nonchalantly. "I have something to ask." "What is it?" I felt miserable as I saw the anticipation on Shin Yu-sung's face. It was because I knew her expectations would never be rewarded. "Who is the great demon that helped you cross over to this world?" She stared blankly at Yu Jong-hyuk for a moment before laughing. "Captain is the captain to the end. You don't change. Tell me. Have you heard of the great demon of the horizon? That is why I admired you. I know the name. If Captain's luck is bad, you will meet him soon. However, never fight him. It is almost impossible for Captain to kill him. For a long time, a really long time." Her earnest sincerity didn't reach its target and I struggled. I wanted to say something. This stupid Yu Jong-hyuk, who couldn't hear the vivid voice in front of him. The moment I opened my mouth, Shin Yu-sung's hand grabbed me. Yu Jong-hyuk kept speaking. "I will remember." Yu Jong-hyuk turned around at these words. Then Yu Jong-hyuk's inner thoughts were conveyed to me. "I will get revenge for you." I trembled at the sadness in these words. I looked down at disaster Shin Yu-sung. I see. This person was already aware of it. She didn't need to hear it to already know. Something was pouring down from Shin Yu-sung's eyes. For the first time, I thought that omniscient reader's viewpoint might not be omniscient. "Goodbye, Captain. Good job. I'll leave it to you. Rest." Only a few stray sentences were left as I stared at the two people. Their thoughts had definitely reached each other. I clearly read this story. Then Shin Yu-sung started to scatter into ashes. "Pretty." The young Shin Yu-sung approached me and held on to me. What did she feel when she saw her future self disappearing? No matter how many books I read, there were some emotions I couldn't reach. The disaster Shin Yu-sung smiled at me and the young Shin Yu-sung. I'm envious. The lower body of the disaster Shin Yu-sung had almost disappeared. The speed of her destruction was accelerating. The constellation demon-like judge of fire has closed her eyes. The constellation prisoner of the golden headband is sighing. As the constellations watched her, I kneeled and grabbed the hand of the disaster Shin Yu-sung. Shin Yu-sung was surprised by my unexpected behavior and looked at me. I invoked Beast King's sensitivity with my last remaining magic power. It was to pass on a gift to her. The mysterious senses of the Beast Kings touched, and for a short moment, Shin Yu-sung's soul was connected to mine. It was a sensibility that only beasts shared. The passing wind whispered something. It was a story that neither the constellations or Dakibi could hear. The dying Shin Yu-sung's eyes widened like she couldn't believe it. Are you serious? Really? Fortunately, the message was properly delivered. Her chest had already turned to ashes, and now she had no voice left. Why? Tears slowly filled her eyes. She tried to tell me something, but the cold wind stopped her. The connected films of two worlds were breaking again. The pieces that she was made of turned to ashes and scattered. Her eyes, nose, and mouth. Her voice. The person who lived over 1,000 years scattered into pure white ashes like snow. The ashes like a trail as it disappeared into the sky. It was like a distant journey or even a dance. I looked up at the faint traces drifting in the air. I couldn't believe it was real, and the young Shin Yusung held onto me tightly. Did she really die? I steadied my heart. Can't you change it? Really? Then she nodded. Ah. Lee Gilyung grabbed my sleeve and wiped his eyes with it. Yusanga was crying, and I didn't know why, but Lee Hyunsung was also tearful. Yu Jonghyuk didn't cry, while only Lee Jaihai didn't know the exact situation. Why is everyone crying? I am also sad. My forehead was cold and sleet was falling from the misty sky. There was no snow or rain. The cold sensation relieved the people. It was funny. Humans felt most alive when they confirmed the death of another. The people of Seoul Dome collapsed once their tension disappeared. There were people laughing, crying, or feeling angry. The donations of the constellation flowed here and there. The responses were different, but there was one thing they all agreed on. The disaster of flood Shin Yusung had died. There was a frozen intermediate Dakibi staring up at the sky. Baihyung, who had been watching silently, finally opened his mouth. Intermediate Dakibi. The scenario has ended. How? This? If you don't do it, then I will end it. A moment later, a message was heard. The fifth main scenario is activated. The compensation settlement is being prepared. Finally, the scenario declared her death. The future Shin Yusung had died and the disaster was over. This was the conclusion of the fifth scenario. Everyone thought so, and believed so. To be exact, everyone except me had to believe this. From beginning to end, everything had to be a perfect drama. It was a drama that declared things couldn't be changed. A tragedy that followed the constellations and scenario. This was the only way for the 41st round Shin Yusung to escape from the damn scenario. At this moment, the young Shin Yusung's hand heated up. I will kill. The girl's eyes were fixed on the intermediate Dakibi, floating in the air. That Dakibi, I'll kill him. I was trying to restrain her when sparks flew in the air. The sky was crumbling and a portal was opening. 2 white Dakibis emerged from the portal. The low-grade Dakibis found the 2 Dakibis wearing white armor and backed away at once. It was natural. These Dakibis were people that all Dakibis hoped to never meet. The Bureau. They were the Dakibis of the executive branch, responsible for investigating the probability in scenarios. The 2 Dakibis had a fearsome atmosphere as they approached the intermediate Dakibi and arrested him. Executives. What are you doing? An executive Dakibi declared to the shocked intermediate Dakibi. Intermediate Dakibi, Paul. You shall be arrested for violating the Starstream regulations.